Cults just don't control your life, they control your mind. Today, we're talking with Liz, a frontline worker helping people escape one of the strictest religious communities in New Zealand, Gloriavale. She's heard stories most of us never could. She's helped survivors slip away in the dark. And she fights every day to undo the damage of this high control group. The same kind of control seen in cults like the FLDS under Warren Jeffs. This is what it takes to escape. Liz, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for the invitation.
So there is so much to unpack here. I was introduced to you through a film that was done, and I just thought, man, I got to talk to Liz. I love the work that you're doing. It's incredible. You're right on the ground. You're this grassroots movement that are helping these cult survivors. So let's start with you telling me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved.
Thanks. That's a lovely opportunity there. I just need to let people know straight up that I'm not a former member of this group. So, that might disappoint your listeners, but I do have this really unique position where we have worked really closely with probably around 300 people in the last sort of decade or so who have actually left this group, which is a significant number given that at their peak, they got to around 600 people. So they're sitting around 550 at present. So I am in a really unique position. And look, it was just one of those things. You're ambling along in life, you're doing your thing. We were involved with our local church. My husband and I, we had a craft business. I had retired from school teaching a few years earlier, and we were looking for a new direction, but we couldn't have created this one for ourselves if we tried. Rosanna and Elijah, who were in the film series that you're talking about, which was called Escaping Utopia, they left Gloriavale around 13 years ago. And they were the first second-generation couple to leave who had married and had children. And so it was quite a big, brave, bold thing for them to do, just to get up as a family and go. And they just happened to come into our region. He got a job down here, and they ended up coming along to our church. And so we just, the whole church family just reached out, realised that, Rosanna looked desperately sad, and they didn't really have any furniture in their house. And then we found out where they'd come from. And we all had a little bit of understanding about Gloriavale, but nothing really. It had been kept, quite isolated and in the dark from the public of New Zealand. And so, literally, they arrive and it just all goes from there. And so I guess my background was really just an average Kiwi going about their daily lives. And I think we're just probably our Christian faith. We're just open for whatever needs doing, however we can help, we help. And this seems to be the little sphere that we slotted into. So quite accidentally.
Yeah. No, that's great. So are you the founding member then? Or there was a group of you?
So there was a group of us, just, church members, and then started getting friends involved. And so it would have been about 7 years ago that we officially started a charity because the work became too big. People were leaving. What ended up happening was that original group that left, Rosanna and Elijah, and then people from our church who were assisting them, there was an encouragement for them to go and get other family members out, that this was not a good place to be in. And something began that you would have mentioned you would have seen mentioned in the Escaping Utopia documentary, that the Timaru night raiders or the night missions were mentioned. And that's really just talking about the group from Timaru and our church. We're from Timaru. We're 4.5 hours away from Gloriavale on the other side of the island. So we're not nearby. So it's basically, there's a bit of a network that stretches now all the way across the island and back again, a little bit of a smuggling network, things getting smuggled in and people coming out, things that go in, phones, pamphlets, books, a lot of Christian literature. They are people that say that they are Christians. They're called the Gloriavale Christian Community, which really does irk former members because how dare they use the name of God in this way with the behaviors that were occurring. And so to work with people in a very strict, indoctrinated religious group like that, it's very helpful to actually use biblical material to assist their mind to show them that there's another way. This isn't actually what the Bible says. So it was very, important work that was going on to get information in because
Yeah.
cults rely on a lack of information.
Yep.
And you hear one narrative your whole life and your brain and neural pathways, that's just where they get set. But they can move, they can adjust. And this work has proven no one is outside of the reach of being deprogrammed or seeing another perspective.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Now, you said their Bible. What Bible do they follow? Like, 'cause it must be rewritten a little bit what they're following versus what you're giving them, or is it the same?
No, so they just use a King James version, and
Really?
so it's the twist that they give each verse that creates the cultic patterns. Yeah,
Okay.
literally every verse has a twist. Things that we're just like, wow, that is not how you read that passage. How about you know considering another way? And it doesn't take them very long once they start being willing to engage with people on the outside or people who are sharing this with them for the penny to start dropping. I think people in these groups, when you're abused, you know something's not right. You know it doesn't feel right. Everyone has that shelf at the back of their head that has doubts get piled up on it. And eventually the shelf breaks, and the shelf is broken for a lot of people, and more in there today that will be thinking about leaving soon.
Yep. Yep. So, how many current members are there?
There's around 550. There's probably only, there might be 470 or so living on in the actual main complex in the hostel situation, because they've had quite a lot of men go through the courts. I think over 23 men have been through the courts in the last 3 or 4 years for sexual offending, physical offending. There were some fraud charges as well related to finances and business. And so what ended up happening is quite a lot of the men needed to be put on bail. And so they do have some properties that sit outside the main complex, mainly their farms. And then they've actually started a secondary community 40 kilometres away, called Lake Brunner. And on that it's just like a growing community. They were a bit too overpopulated. So they've done this new plant, and people are living in individual houses there. And so that has created a little bit of just an opportunity for people to spread out, have a little bit more space and safety. So there's probably 450 or 470 still living in the hostels of, 5 metre by 5 metre bedrooms. Just
Yeah.
appalling.
So,
Mm.
where does their revenue come from? Where do they get their money?
So they're business people. So the original leader, Hopeful Christian, well, he was called Neville Cooper until he changed his name. He was a very entrepreneurial sort of fellow, so very much into, had the ability to, you know, create. When we went there, we had a tour of Gloriavale several years ago, a decade ago. We're not really invited back anymore. We stayed overnight. They had a concert season, and we did go to that concert. And their founder, Hopeful Christian, just showed us all these amazing things he had built, like the butter machine, the churn is an old concrete mixer, and their chip fryer was made from a bicycle ring. And so he was very creative in those sort of endeavors. And for whatever reason, they got into dairy farming, and that's really been the basis of a lot of their sort of what they call financial success. But now that we look at it, it was all off the back of forced labour and
Yeah.
young slave labour, effectively. One of the court rulings,
Yeah,
put
I
the word
saw
slave
that.
in there.
Has there
Mm.
been an update or a settlement with that yet?
Yes. So 3 years ago, there were, what we call the boys. work case and the girls' employment case. So they were taken separately. The boys were doing work on work teams from the age of 6, and they were on rostered teams, and they went with groups of men and boys, and they were working very hard. It may have been in the moss swamps in the early years, picking moss and drying it. Could have been in other industries or the gardening team, but there was quite a lot of health and safety risk and physical punishment in those areas. And it wasn't a great childhood. So the judge found that actually they weren't volunteers at all. They were employees from the age of 6, and so they are owed money and compensation. So 3 years on, it's taken this long. The judge has given her ruling that the employer was the overseeing shepherd or the head honcho, the role of, so whoever takes that place. The original leader had died several years ago, and they've had another leader since then, and that one's on bail awaiting sentencing for offending. And so the new leader just took over a few months ago. So they have to take on responsibility for making those payments. And this week in court, and I can't get there, they're having what they call the time bar argument. Gloriavale are trying to argue that the law only says we have to pay you back 6 years, or you get 6 years to make a claim. So they're trying to diminish their liability. And so that will happen. And then the next step next year should be that the judge will actually make a definitive ruling on how much the boys get. And there were just 3 representative plaintiffs in that one. But we've got the big list of everyone else who will then go to the court and say, I'd like mine too, please. And then the girls were more in domestic servitude. They were on rotational teams. You didn't have a choice of where you worked. And so they were working very hard, very long hours, getting up, could be 2, 3, 4 in the morning to start lighting fires, doing bread. And the judge found, and Gloriavale said, no, they're just working for the family. But no, they weren't. They were working in a massive commercial kitchen from young age. So the judge found that they were also employees. And so, waiting now for the rule. Gloriavale appealed it. I was at the appeal hearing just a month ago. So that's why things have taken so long. It takes a long time to have justice in New Zealand. So we're sitting here anxiously for the next few months waiting to see if Gloriavale wins the appeal or not. And then hopefully there'll be payment due to the woman, and changes would have to occur in Gloriavale. The girls they're currently not paying could technically be forced to start paying.
That's good. That's good. And let's I have one question, if you're able to answer it or not. The other community that they started in India, the one sister, have you had any
Precious.
update on her at all and how she's doing?
Yes, so you're talking about Precious. So Gloriavale does have another community in India. They started it more than 20 years ago, and they wear the same long blue dresses, and they have to eat Kiwi food, and they converted the land to dairy farming, even though it was completely inappropriate for it to be dairy farming land. So that community got up to more than 100 people over time. But it has whittled away significantly, and since that 3rd episode where it was revealed, look, New Zealand just went crazy. They just were shocked that these girls from New Zealand, because more teenage males leave Gloriavale than teenage females. The females are more entrapped, really. There was a disconnect between who could get married. If you have a lack of teenage men, you've got girls that are going to be effectively on the shelf. And so the reach out to India was really about expanding the gene pool and the opportunities for marriage. So 5 of the Kiwi girls, I'm going to say, went to India. I'm not going to say chose to go to India, because inside cults, the concept of choice, it's a bit of an illusion. So they went to India, and many of them married Indian men who had physical disabilities, who probably saw this community and thought, what an opportunity. I get to marry a Kiwi, a woman, and live with all my needs being met. Well, you have to work for your needs to be met. And they were met very well, as you could see.
Yeah.
You could see they weren't being met. So all I can only give a partial update. There is information to share. It's not mine to share. It hasn't
No,
been
that's fine.
shared yet. But all I can say is there have been positive movements um, on the Indian front, and there aren't very many people left over there. And it's just an unfolding situation as we
Yeah.
speak. So,
I
yeah,
can't imagine the isolation. Like, I know in Gloriavale in New Zealand, there's lots of isolation, but in India, and the children being born, not having passports, birth certificates, they are so stuck. And that, oh my goodness, that's like another level of isolation there.
absolutely. Even worse, they had to give up their New Zealand citizenship to take on Indian citizenship. So there was this full disconnect. Like they went there knowing they would never come back. Like there was that expectation, but many of them went anyway. Their lives in New Zealand were pretty horrific, some of them. And this was, for some of them, I guess, their way out. Like, how could it be any worse? I'll go over there. Yeah.
Well, let's go back and talk a little bit about the abuse.
Mm.
You had said 23 people, men, and they're like the sexual abuse is rampant in the community. Is that a fair statement to make that it is rampant?
Absolutely. That is what.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And do you want to give any survivor stories or things that you've heard that have really hit you at the core? Like, I can't believe this is still happening.
Oh, it, it's like 13 years worth of information that I have there in my head. It's for many years we never really spoke publicly about the sexual abuse because it's not a very nice feeling after you've left for you to think that people in New Zealand are looking at you thinking, oh, well, you must have been abused, or oh, well, you must have been an abuser. And so for a long time, we remained very quiet about what we knew of the percentages of what we believe were the high rates of sexual abuse. But in 2020, the police went into Gloriavale. Someone revealed abuse had been happening in the male quarter, older males and teens on younger um, boys. And so that did hit the news and it sparked a big major investigation. And I remember the day the headline came out that it said more than 138 potential victims. And then it went on just to say that there were just dozens really of perpetrators who it was a cycle of abuse that had come down from the top leader from 50 years ago. And they had found you know, that it traced all the way back there. And that was quite shocking, even for some people living in Gloriavale who didn't know this had been happening. Obviously, the boys, when you separate your children from you as a parent, because Gloriavale is a working community, mums don't stay at home and look after children. You're on a work team. Other people look after your children. And so a lot of supervisory neglect was occurring, and that just gave a lot of opportunities for abuse to occur. And the general community, the main leader had a bent sexual, was a deviant, and I guess, and he there was a lot of talk of sexual activity. So at the dinner table, a leader might stand up and say, "Oh well, I made love to my wife, last night," and give too many details, things that children don't need to hear. Actually, adults don't need to hear it either.
Yeah.
It's your private business. So
Yeah.
they did believe that sexual activity should occur in marriage. So they were very purity culture around those issues. And yet they thought that there shouldn't be this prudishness. So you, as a children, you should be watching your parents, and the parents should make the children watch. And so, yeah, I've got the stories of people I know that were in bed with the main leader and his wife, and they had to lie there and listen to the marital relations of this man. I know numbers of stories like that. Even on his honeymoon to his third wife, there was a teenager in his bed on one of the honeymoon nights, and they were just as shocked to be there, I think, and the things that were going on. So when you get a community like that led by a very strong autocrat, his personality gets imprinted on the entire cult. And so there was a sexualization of the young people. And so it's not just that, like, I think a lot of people have a wrong impression with Gloriavale that it's just the leaders, classic sexual offenders, and offend against the people under them. But actually, that's not. There are some leaders who have and did, but actually, it was the average population had become perpetrators as things had happened to them and as the culture developed. So it's quite complex. It's not just, oh, so let's take the leadership out and arrest them and everything's going to come right. No, there's a pervasive sexualization that occurred. And actually, to solve that problem, you need to interface with society, come out and be socialized and realize what's appropriate and what's
Yes.
not.
Yeah.
And that works. We've seen that. We've seen people's lives utterly turned around. They're not at all a risk. You're at a risk when you're risky when you're living in really close quarters with your siblings. Young men were able to come into these dormitories. Everyone's so exhausted, and they would come in at 3 a.m. to wake up their friend for milk the cows, and there might be a grope and grab situation occurring with one of the sisters on the bed. But everyone's so tired, voiceless. It's classic cult. They're pretty shut down emotionally. It's always the girl's fault.